Welcome to the Science and Paranormal with Dr. Yana and Dr. Elliot, where science meets the unexpected, where we delve deep into the mysteries that straddle the line between scientific inquiry and paranormal. Get ready for a mind-altering journey as we embark on this phenomenal discovery together on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM.
I always mess that up.
Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Dr. Elliot. Good evening, Morgan. We are live on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM with Science and Paranormal. We have a fantastic guest today, Morgan Knudsen, who's been involved in the paranormal field for 20 years. Oh, it's so crazy to say 20 years. Oh my God, it's so good. She's been inspired by her great-great-grandfather, Dr. Durrant Watson, a pioneering figure in Canadian psychical research. And 2003, she co-founded Entityseeker Paranormal Research and Teachings, developing the Teaching the Living investigative program. Morgan has been featured on various TV shows and channels, including the Discovery Channel, A Haunting, Haunted Hospitals, and Coast to Coast AM. She has presented her work at the Rhine Research Center and the Parapsychological Association. Morgan hosts the podcast, the incredible podcast Supernatural Circumstances, and contributes to Haunted Magazine. She also hosts dinner galas. Hope to be invited in the future, Dr. Elliot and I. Video productions and walking classrooms offering hands-on investigative experiences. Her presentations combine personal paranormal experiences, spiritual insights, and creative elements like fire arts to inspire and captivate audiences. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
This
is
have
great.
You here.
Yes, thank you for coming. Your name has popped up many times in my social media feed, and I think it was an article that Brian Baker had written for the Superstitious Times where he interviewed the two of us. So I decided to finally reach out to you, and yeah, it's great to have you on the show. The first thing I want to ask you is about your great-great-grandfather. How did all that transpire? How did you discover that he was involved in the paranormal? And would you say that that is one of the reasons why you ended up getting involved with the paranormal?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's a really great question, and I actually didn't know anything about him until like 5 or 6 years into my career, which is crazy. But in typical Canadian fashion, as Elliot, you and I have talked about before, people don't talk about stuff in the same way that they talk about it in the States. So I didn't know about it, and even though AD was a prominent figure in Canadian history. He was a poet. He was an astronomer. He wrote poetry books. He was, heavily inspired, by many great poets. He was a very famous physician. His house is a historical location in Mississauga in Ontario. Or Toronto. Sorry, it's crazy. But I had no idea until we ended up, the family got a hold of some documents, and it turned out that not only were we, related, obviously, but that his work very much mimicked the same direction that my work was going, which was very unique, especially at the time, because at the time it was very much about jump scares and terrifying things that people were seeing, ghost hunting on TV, and that's not what AD did. AD was all about understanding that this work is about consciousness, and that this is actually a really, really positive, positive field to be in. The majority of people have extremely positive and life-changing experiences, and and he was going that direction just as I was. It was just an obvious connection, but it's such an honor to be related to him, because he was he's so significant in the world of parapsychology.
That's amazing. Did you ever do any research on, because he was president of the Association for Psychical Research of Canada, did you ever do any research on the organization itself and what happened to that?
Yeah, it kind of ended up just it went through a lot of transformations as the years went on, and eventually it just seemed to just get a little bit lost. I hope that Entityseekers kind of picked that up. Moving forward, unbeknownst to myself and Stephanie at the time when we started it, but we. I kind of looked to continue that on, but he took a lot of flack during that time period, because here he was, a physician, man of science, who had been a complete skeptic going into this. And of course, here he is publishing 2 books on the subject, and getting involved with studying channeling and all sorts of things. And he took some massive heat for that. And his colleagues were like, you shouldn't be a doctor. You shouldn't be, this is crazy. What the hell are you doing? And so he kind of disbanded a bit from it. He had to back away near the end of his career, because he was just getting so much flack for standing up for this field. And eventually he just said, look, this is what I found. Okay. Like, here's the books, take it or leave it. This is what I found. But he had a remarkable life, really remarkable.
So Morgan, that would be probably early 1900s.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm not surprised to hear that, though, to hear about the stigma that he faced. But that's really fascinating that he did that, and then you discovered it, and you discovered it while you were investigating the paranormal, which is even more interesting. But I thought that was really cool. That's a really cool part of your background, I think.
The genes live on.
Yeah.
That's cool. Supernatural Circumstances, that is your podcast that you co-host.
Yep.
Tell us about that. How many seasons are you into? What kind of guests have you had on there? Tell us all about that.
Oh yeah, it's been one of the best things I ever did in my career. I host it with a very good friend of mine, Mike Brown, who is famous for the Dark Poutine true crime podcast here in Canada. And the two of us actually ended up connecting over haunted hospitals. I was on Dark Poutine for an episode, and as soon as the two of us got talking, it was like instantaneously we knew that there was something in the future. There was something that was going to happen, and both of us were so tired of the information, like the true information about parapsychology, just not being discussed. It was all just, as like we were saying before, jump scares and ghost hunting and gimmicky stuff, when you've got all of these incredible minds, the top minds in the world that are studying this, that have like neurologists and scientists, quantum physicists, like parapsychologists, folklorists, professors, all these people, like the top minds in the world that are studying this stuff, and nobody is getting any airtime. The real life, true stuff isn't getting airtime. And I called him up the one day and I said, look, what do you think about doing a talk show, podcast, and starting to change that? And he said, I love it. Let's see what we can do. And so we launched into the first number of episodes, and we pulled what I think are some of the best people on the planet for this, including, like, we had on Matt Baglio, who was the author of The Right with Anthony Hopkins. He was a journalist that we talked about exorcism. We've had on recently, we're having a series with Dr. Evan Alexander, who's New York Times bestseller of Proof of Heaven. We've got 3-part episode. The first part's up, second part's up on Monday, and the third part will be up here in the future. So we've got that series coming out. We've had on, Dr. Cal Cooper talking about telephone calls from the dead, Paul Bestall from Monsters and Mysteries in America, or Monsters and Mysteries podcast. I mean, it's just an endless list of these incredible minds coming together to talk about consciousness and why it's related, why it relates to everybody. Why is it important to everybody? Well, how do we impact our reality? How do we how do we look at these cases, which are, some of them are absolutely incredible, some of them are weird, some of them are scary, some of them are inspiring, but how do we look at these cases, break them down, and start to understand what it is that's going on here? And it's accessible to everyone. We both, Mike and I, we're both nerds, and we always want to make this stuff really accessible to everybody that's listening. But it's the best minds in the world coming together to talk about what we think is the most important subject, which is consciousness and the phenomenon that comes from that. So that's what Supernatural Circumstances is. And we just, I don't know, we kind of gave up on seasons. Now we're just doing episodes. So I don't even know where we're at now. but it's hands down one of the best things I've ever done.
That's fantastic. So how much time do you dedicate to, because I know you've got your hands in many different things in the paranormal. You do some producing and some research for television shows. And I mean, you're obviously appearing on other podcasts such as Science and the Paranormal. How much time do you put into Supernatural Circumstances?
A fair amount, because we're really thorough when it comes to our guests and our interviews. We want to read all the material that they, at least as much as we can of the studies and what they've put out, like books and all sorts of things. I mean, we're so lucky because we get all these awesome books to read and whatever. But we put a lot of time into it because we really think that our audience is super smart. And we treat them like they're super smart. So, we want to ask the questions that people have in their head about all of this stuff. Like, how do we make this something that's accessible to people so that they're not sitting there reading a bunch of white papers? Because who wants, it's boring, right? This is just boring. So how do we make this fun and we make this exciting? Because this is like one of the, to me, it's the most exciting topic you can talk about. I mean, this is the reality behind hauntings and consciousness and ESP and, all sorts of stuff. So, we put in a lot of work to this show, and I hope it shows.
Well, Morgan, this is so interesting. You mentioned that we all come to this field with stories. And of course, every one of us has a very interesting story which brought us to this field. And you mentioned that you had fun as well. Now, how did that story of yours brought you into the field of the paranormal and investigation of the paranormal research in this area before you even, of course, knew that your great-grandfather was doing research?
Sure, yeah.
As well. So how did you come to it? And did you have anything that would indicate that in your childhood, that interest that you had?
Oh,
Perhaps.
yeah. I had experiences when I was a kid. I think most researchers have going into this. There's something that happens that they can't explain that gets us started into this. When I wrote my book, The Gift of Instinct, it was funny because the more of the giants in parapsychology that I researched, people like J.B. Rhine and Eileen Garrett, people like that, what was really fascinating was that every single person that I delved into had a calling for this. There was a calling that pulled them forward to the point where J.B. Rhine, for instance, who, of course, is the namesake of the Rhine Institute, he was a botanist. Like, he was a botanist, and he was a tenured professor. He had his life figured out, and then he attended a lecture by Arthur Conan Doyle, who was coming to talk about spiritism and stuff like that. And it was like in that moment, he left the lecture, he called his wife, and he said, "I have to quit my job." And she's like, "What?" Louisa Ryan's like, "What is going on?" And
she was
like,
excited.
Yeah, she got excited later. It's just like, what is going on? And he said, "No, you don't understand." He's like, "This is what I meant to do." And he quit his job. He actually went back to university. He went to Harvard, went back to university, took psychology, took all of the courses prepping him for parapsychology, and then literally went 180-degree career shift and got into parapsychology and never looked back. And
did anything similar happen to you?
Well, and that's exactly what I'm getting to, is that when I was younger, I had experiences of like hauntings and what you consider like the sort of the classic hauntings and whatnot when I was a kid. And the first experience I had freaked me out, But after I got over the what the hell was that, it was like, wait a minute, what just happened? What is this?
What did you see?
I ended up seeing, the one morning I had come downstairs, I wasn't very old, I was about 8 or 9, and I saw a figure come out of our kitchen at the time and rush me. And it was really fast. It was like, and that was sort of the culmination of weeks before that, of strange things going on in the house, stuff moving around where it shouldn't have been, seeing depressions on the bed, hearing footsteps, like all the typical stuff that you'd see or you'd consider as a haunting. But, here I was like 9 years old and going like, what do you mean there's ghosts? Like what? What is this? What is going on? And I was really fortunate because I grew up in the era of, people on TV like Lloyd Auerbach and Carrie Gaynor, and both people who or at least Lloyd Auerbach I've had on Supernatural Circumstances now a couple of times. And it was so interesting because it flipped on this switch for me where I was like, hey, like what is this? I couldn't put it down. Like I couldn't let it go. And I kind of knew at that point, like, that this is what I wanted to do. So we ended up, my family ended up moving from BC to Alberta and whatnot. And in between, like living in all these houses that had stuff going on, like each one was very unique and we had just unique stuff that was happening. And, and then I met my business partner, my best friend, Stephanie Wirtz, and we were in junior high together at that point. And I was still really steeped in this, and she was having experiences that were going on. So the two of us connected, like we just really, really quick, we just connected immediately. And, here we were like a decade later, deciding once we really got into this research that this is what we wanted to do. So throughout this time period, what we just started to discover, which ended up to be the basis of our program, Teaching the Living, was that this stuff isn't about the external at all. And most people, when they get into this field, we all start the same way. We all think, oh yeah, it's about researching all this stuff out there. And you realize really fast that it isn't. It's all from the inside out. Like this is about consciousness. This is about something completely, there's all this phenomenon that's going on, but it comes back to understanding ourselves and understanding consciousness. And that's where Steph and I kind of went. And then when she passed away, I took the reins at that point and have like pushed forward ever since. And just, again, it's this calling to something bigger than you. And there's nothing else like it. Like it's very, very specific, and so many people have it. It's really interesting.
That's amazing. With the work that you do, I assume that you get asked to speak at a lot of conferences and symposiums.
It's Canada. Which ones?
Do you get requested to speak down in the U.S. where?
Oh gosh, if I do, it's like this. I mean, there's usually all my work for the U.S. is virtual, or it's by what do you call it? It's either virtual or TV, right? So
I know there's actually a lot of symposiums and conferences still doing the online thing. I could see, after COVID happened, I can also see having organized in-person ones with the Halifax Paranormal Symposium. That it's a lot cheaper to do, online as well. There's no venues and food and catering and things like that. But no, it's interesting. With the television shows that you've worked on, have you done a lot of traveling to different locations with that?
Yeah, it's been really cool actually with the shows. Like I've done now, we have actually got a new one coming out in October called My Haunted Hometown, which is going to be completely unique. There's nothing else on TV like this one. It's really cool. And it's been pretty interesting. Like we've had a lot of cases, a lot of really unique stuff. Shot haunted hospitals for like 5 years. I shot Paranormal 911 for 2 years. And just seeing those different cases and the people that you end up engaged with is really, really wild. Like, especially the medical ones are really interesting, because many of the people there, like my great-great-grandfather, there's a stigma there, right? So when they come forward, it's a big deal. A lot of these people are really, really afraid of what's going to happen once they come forward. And well, now what, right? Like, now this is going to be all over the US and Canada. Like, so I think, like, every time I do a show, I keep that in mind, no matter what I'm doing. Like, this is an opportunity to start to break down some of those stigmas, and to at least put in front of the audience some factual information that they can then go research, and it can be backed up. It's not my belief or my opinion. It's just like, this can be backed up, through studies and through like the Society of Psychical Research, or, things like that. Even, I mean, I can't control what the other, like experts, say on the show or anything, but that's what I try to do. So every time I get an opportunity with one of these shows, that's kind of my objective. Like, whether it's like looking at a location, I just got done filming a sort of a documentary recently here. Is just trying to put that out in front of people in a way that's just, that's truthful and has some integrity behind it.
I love it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know I kind of faced a similar situation when I was writing my 2 law enforcement paranormal books. I was told by individuals, like, how did you get people like in the law enforcement community to speak with you and tell you these things? Because, they're professional witnesses. Same thing. There's a lot of ridicule within the police force. I've talked to different people, some people down in the States, that their department's very open to the supernatural. My experience with the RCMP was that they were not very open to it. Certainly when I wrote the book, I would use pseudonyms to protect individuals. Some places I even had to change the location, but all their stories were all true. True accounts of what they perceived and experienced. My wife's cousin actually worked. She's a registered nurse, and she worked with somebody at a hospital in Antigonish that was on haunted hospitals, which I thought was really cool. Have you come out to Nova Scotia at all for any of the shows?
No, I haven't. But my co-host Mike, he's actually from there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he's there.
I've heard of his podcast then, because when you mentioned Dark Poutine, I have actually heard of that podcast. I mean, there's so many different shows now and podcasts, and I always get people emailing me, got to listen to this one and that one, but it's just so hard to find the time. Like, especially, I'm a stay-at-home father, and I run paranormal phenomena research investigation. When I'm not parenting, so and then of course, like you said, staying on top of the research. I actually just got the newest journal.
Nice.
For psychical research just arrived, so I have to take a look at what's in there. So it's tough to find the time, but I thought that was really interesting that nurses and medical staff felt the same way that law enforcement did about being careful, who they tell their experiences to.
Yeah, well, I mean, that stigma is still there, right? And I mean, it's becoming a lot less. Like, it's definitely a lot less in the US than it is here. In Canada, I've noticed that in a big way. You talk to a lot of the people in the States, and it's a lot more open about this. Like, there's elements of paranormal and stuff like that. Even within law enforcement and stuff like that now, it's being taken a bit more seriously. And it's very interesting. It's like, depending on where you go, people just have different takes. Like, recently I was doing some shooting, and we were talking about the Wendigo, and it like, you talk about the Wendigo in the States, you're going to have a very different reaction when we talk about the Wendigo in Canada, right? Like, you talk about it in Alberta. I mean, this is like the hot spot for these cases. Like, they come out like mad. And, we've got a long steeped history here in Alberta of bizarre Wendigo stories. Our first hanging in Alberta, legal hanging in Alberta, was Wendigo case. And so it goes right back through our court systems. And you bring that name up here in Alberta, and people are people are not happy about it. So, you know, but you go to the States and everybody wants to talk about it. It's in pop culture, and, you know, it's different. So,
You know, and
interesting.
nevertheless, you have a lot of people talking about it and researching the paranormal. Nevertheless, this is so interesting to me that you're saying that we're more open here, but nevertheless, you guys do a lot of research into that as well, and you talk about it. You wrote this incredible book, The Gift of Instinct. You know, when I saw that, I recalled the beginning of the time when I was investigating and researching, excuse me, researching archetypal psychology, with which, of course, I have had the lifelong love affair. But at the very beginning, when my professors tried to explain it to all of us students, and I, of course, was asking many questions because I still could not understand what it was. What is the archetype? And with all of their elaborate explanations, I finally said, "Oh, so it is just instinct." And they looked at me and they were lost. They're like, yeah, it's instinct. So when you wrote about the gift of instinct, this is what I immediately thought about. We can talk about one and the same subject from so many different perspectives. And you, I think, nailed it. So why are you talking it? Why did you talk, of course, that and still talking about the gift of instinct?
Oh gosh, I mean, originally when I was asked to write the book, I wrote my first one, Teaching the Living, and then the publishing company was like, "Okay, we want you to write another book." And I'm like, "Okay, do you guys have a topic preference?" And they're like, "No, just write something you haven't written before." And Teaching the Living covered a lot, and so I kind of went back and I'm like, "What did I not get to in this book?" And I thought about it for a really long time. It took me a bit, and then I realized that one of the things that really wasn't covered was that, or I should say, could be elaborated on. It's not that it wasn't covered, but it could be elaborated on. Is the fact that we all have a calling somewhere in relationship to understanding something greater than us, something, this consciousness that we're connected into. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. So then what did that mean for me in the world of the paranormal, in research? What does that mean for me? And then I realized, because each one of the things within parapsychology has a lesson in it. And so I began to dissect, what are those lessons? What are those lessons that I learned about consciousness, about myself within this field, that would pertain to other people, that would matter to other people, that would, you know, that they could take something away from this. So I started to look at cases and stories of very famous, notable people in the field, such as J.B. Rhine and William Roll, and all these really fascinating individuals, and cases like weird ones, like the Van Meter visitor, for instance, from Iowa. I talk about the Jersey Devil. I talk about, so there's a couple of haunting cases in there, and I even talk about Napoleon Hill and Neville Goddard. And what does all this have to be? And Napoleon Hill, interestingly enough, was also was watching J.B. Rhine very, very, very carefully. So those guys were all kind of intertwined together. But yeah, so I thought, well, what is this? Like, what came from this? And I began to realize that every single one of these stories had a connection, and that was this instinctual calling that they had, knowing that there was something else going on, and that there was these lessons within all of this that people can take away from it. So I began to kind of piece out these lessons, and I think there's 11 in there, and whatnot. Each chapter is a different case, and what can come of it. But by the end of it, I realized it's like, it doesn't matter what angle you take, but at the end of the day, it all comes back to understanding your own instinct, this calling, this instinctual connection that we have to something that we can't see. And so that's how the gift of instinct came about. And my little baby Galen, he's on the cover because I have a bit in there about the significance of animal consciousness, but also that snakes in general typically represent the renewal of spirit. And so that was significant as well. So it was really interesting very, very interesting to write it. And I got to interview some incredible people like Lizette Coley, who's the president of the Parapsychology Foundation, and who's a dear friend of mine, and all sorts of just absolutely phenomenal minds throughout this. But no matter who you're talking to, no matter what age it is, and no matter what age the story is, you can pull things and you can see you'll find something to connect with. It's really cool. These are timeless lessons, absolutely timeless.
And when you think about it, about exactly the timeless lessons, and you mentioned Napoleon Hill, and when I first read his book and saw the way that he looked, and of course that every time that I read a book, I read a biography, because I want to know what are the sources, where did the person come from, why he wrote a certain book. And he looked very much professional and nicely put together, sane person, normal person, so to say, right? And then I discovered that he himself, just like many other scientists and writers who came to discovery of something that we know now, right, and use on a daily basis, they all had this intuitive insight into something. Like Mendeleev, for example, he saw Russian, by the way, Mendeleev, the periodic table in chemistry that we still use, and this is so interesting that he saw that in his dream. So did Napoleon Hill. He was very much into his intuitive side, and he was essentially consulting with his higher self, personified his higher self, which was helping him write the book. So if we looked at all those people, like you mentioned, I want to have all of those professionals, people who actually do research in the parapsychology, in the paranormal, and I want to bring those people and their opinions and their research into public, right, for people to know about it. And that's what exactly everyone has been doing. And it is so interesting to me that despite this large number of all of these people that we know, the scientists, the writers, and everyone who does research into it and published and books or papers about it in different journals, it is amazing to me that there is still a lot of skepticism going on, and people are not shy of opening the mouth and saying negative things about it, which is okay. But I think that we need to observe more and read autobiographies in order to know where people come from, because so many things that we use on an everyday basis, they all came from the inspiration at some point in time in the past, and we would not have known about it until we read the biographies. So you're writing on instinct and the gift. Essentially, it's a gift. It's not just the instinct. You say it's a gift. Why is it a gift, Morgan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I talk in the book a lot about the idea of fear and what fear can mean to us. So this is a really good example of exactly what I'm talking about, where I talk about in the book that there's really fear can be divided into two parts. One being the fear that we have based on the stories we tell ourselves, which are, things like irrational fears of spiders, or, something like that, where you've got a story in your head about whatever something is, and you're responding to your small self, the thinking mind, rather than something greater. And then you have something else, which is that gift of instinct, and that can come in a number of different ways. One of the ways is the gift of fear. How we read about this in news articles and things like that all the time. And Mike, my co-host, he sees it all the time because, of course, he hosts true crime show as well. How many people that say, I knew something was off about this person before I came into before I let him in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I knew not to walk into that parking lot, but I told myself I was being stupid. I thought this person was a little off, and I ignored it because I didn't want to be mean. And we hear it all the time too in situations where, there's, a haunting maybe or something like that that's not too friendly. People move into a house and they're like, I knew something wasn't right in the house, but I thought I was just being ridiculous. And we're the only species in the world that actually pushes down our instinct. Whether it be an instinct in regards to fear or an instinct in regards to, hey, wait a minute, like I need to follow that idea. Like, what is this idea that I can't let go of? Is that a lot of this stuff is very much inspired, and I firmly believe it's inspired from something bigger than us. I think we're hardwired to have this level of psi, this level of intuition. There's guidance there, and whatever, and that in and of itself is a gift that we can hone, and not everybody hones it. So that's another area. Like, you can choose to have it, or you can and pay attention to it, or not. You can push that gift down until you're until you're not listening anymore.
But it is there, and you're saying that everyone has it.
Everyone has it. And just in the same way that, people say, well, I couldn't possibly, be a medium, or I couldn't possibly do remote viewing. No, you can't. Everybody can do this stuff. This isn't something that is unique to one specific person. That's when people get into trouble with, paying people to do this, that, the other thing for them. No, any true teacher will empower you to learn. And
well, the thing is that when people say to themselves that I can't, they are right. And when they say that
absolutely
they can, and they're also right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so true. The belief plays a big factor in it.
Everything.
And, I've talked about it on this show before with my intuition. So as a police officer, I would always listen to my intuition, and it led me on some wild cases. I talk about this one time I pulled a guy over just for like a mundane traffic stop, but there was something in my gut telling me that, something else is wrong. And sure enough, the guy had 50 stolen IDs in the back of his trunk. It was turned into a major fraud investigation. It was contacted people all over, Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia. And I told Dr. Yana, when I would come home, I would not listen to my intuition, and things would go wrong every time. Like, whether it was, don't take this way, like I got a bad feeling about taking this way, or I should probably move this, or it's going to get broken. I would always ignore that. And sure enough, I was suffering consequences. And when I started to say, why do I listen to my intuition at work, but I don't listen to it at home? I'm going to start listening to it. And I started doing that, and things have gotten a lot smoother for me. So I totally believe in what you're saying there.
Yeah,
this is incredible.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
We are also interested, and we want to talk to you. This is an incredible conversation. I think that if we were just sitting in one room, had the dinner together, we'd be just chatting for hours and hours. So this is so interesting. Well, meanwhile, we are live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM, and you are with Science and the Paranormal with Dr. Elliot and Dr. Yana. And today we're discussing the gift of instinct with Morgan Knudsen.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic because many people don't relate it to anything to do with the paranormal or anything like that. But the paranormal is such it's sort of an overused word. Like, at the end of the day, this is the study of and the understanding that we are connected to something. And then when you can nurture that, and you can, be more present, use techniques like mindfulness. Like, this isn't something you have to be, some, telepathic, tried, tested and true medium or anything like that to understand or get in touch with. This is something that every single person can get in touch with just by finding the present moment, just by beginning to find the now, beginning to listen, like exactly what you said, Elliot, this listening to your instinct, that those gut feelings, that intuition, like, what is that? I began to realize early on that I had a bit of claircognizance, where I was able to predict things that were coming down the pipe, usually things that weren't that great, but it saved a couple of lives. Like, I had a friend who, and I talk about this at the beginning of the book, I had a friend who had broken up with her ex, and everything, like, he was really upset and everything, but it seemed to be okay. And I had an overwhelming feeling that and I had told her this early. I said, I think this guy's going to try to kill you. And she thought I was crazy. She's just like, what do you mean? No, it's fine. He's just an idiot. And whatever. And I said, I don't think so, man. I think there's something that's gonna go on here. And it got to the point as time went on that I called her and I said, look, I said, for the next 2 weeks, I said, go stay with your parents. So just go stay with them. And she said, I'm not gonna go stay with them. Like, I got shit to do. I'm not gonna do that. And the feeling and the knowing, and it's not just like, I think maybe something's going on. No. Like, this is a knowing. Like, this isn't a guess. It's like, no, look, this guy is going to try to kill you. Like, this is it. So I ended up sending her an email the one day, and I said, I'm hoping that this is not going to be the last message that I send you, but it's the last message I'm going to address to you about this. I just laid it flat with her. I said, I think this guy's gonna try to kill you. Like, there's no question in my mind that this is gonna happen. Anyway, she ignored me. And it was within a very short time period later that this guy showed up at her door with a duffel bag and a shotgun. And he got into her house, and he said, if I can't have you, nobody can have you. And the only thing that saved her was the fact that she had gotten a roommate to help pay the mortgage payments who was upstairs, and he didn't know. So as this guy's standing on the stairs with a shotgun ready to blow her head off, the roommate saw him and snuck down the steps at the back and jumped him and whatever. And they were able to call the cops. And she called me the next day and she's just like, oh my God, this guy tried to, and whatever. No acknowledgement for what I had said before, but
she didn't listen to you. She did not go stay with her parents.
No. And I mean, and on the surface, I can kind of understand it, because on the surface there was no direct evidence that there was something that was going to happen. This was pure, like, this was pure instinct, but it was dead on. That's happened to me numerous times in my life. That's just the one example, but people around me know that if I tell them something, you just listen, because the odds are it's probably going to play out. And it's like, I've got a pretty good accuracy as to doing this, but but again, it's just that listening to the instinct, and just when it happens, don't doubt it. Just move forward and see where it takes you, because it's invaluable. And it's that being quiet in your head enough that you can just tap in and receive the guidance, because it'll tell you.
Well, you made an interesting point about getting yourself to the point where you're able to actually hear and listen to your and talk about our modern society as well, and just how busy things are, and how we've all got cell phones, and we're focused on multitasking and trying to get as much work done in as little time as possible. And I think that really affects our psi abilities as well, because we're not able to actually focus. And then it's also interesting that you said for the most part, when you get your precognition, or even with premonitions or precognition, it does always seem to be something negative. I don't know if the negativity comes through a lot stronger. There have been some cases, I just talked about this with my class that I was teaching in parapsychology with Dr. Darrell Walsh. So he had an incident where he knew that one of the members of his research team was going to come out and ask him where the washroom was, just something simple like that. And sure enough, it played out exactly the way that he had envisioned it, just something very, small and mundane. And then another example was just recently, about 2 weeks ago, one of my investigators had messaged me, and he's kind of prone to getting precognitive thoughts that come through. And he said, tomorrow at around, I think he said 1:13, I'm going to get a call from the job that I applied for, and they're going to offer me the job. And he's like, but I'm going to have to use the washroom, and I'm going to miss the call. So sure enough, he sends me a screenshot at 1:16. So he's 3 minutes off. He had the phone call from the job at 1:16. And I was joking around with him though. And he's, he said he took the job and he's happy. And I said, but did you have to use the washroom at that time? He said, yes, I was holding it in. But it was kind of funny because that's like, a cool, nice kind of precognition example. Whereas, like you said, most of them are usually very negative. My mom has had a lot of precognitive dreams that have come true. And my dad never used to believe her until, like you said, once she started telling him so many different things and that they would play out, then he started to believe her. Like one was just a random one of his coworkers. She said, your coworker Tommy's father's going to have a heart attack, and sure enough, the next day, Tommy's father had the heart attack. She was on a television show called Shadowhunter, where she had this dream where she was peeling potatoes and somebody knocked at the door, and he was wearing a red ball cap and wanted to come in and use the phone, and she let him in to use the phone, and he had killed her in the dream. So the following day, sure enough, there was a knock at the door. She answered it, but it still had like the chain across the door. And he had said that he needed to use the phone, and he was wearing a red ball cap. So that's back when we had those big, chunky, portable phones. So instead of letting him into the house like she did in the dream, she passed him the phone through the door and then shut the door. She heard him make a phone call, and then
Why not just shut the door, guys? Just shut it.
Well,
Don't give them any phone or anything.
We're kind people. Someone says they need to use the phone, even though they want to kill us. Let them
Yeah, that's very nice.
When I fell down the stairs, when I was consulting on a demonology case, I fell down the stairs. I twisted my ankle, and I opened the door to thank the postal person that caused me to fall down the stairs. Like, we're just kind.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because like I said, most of precognition and premonition events are very negative. So
I don't know if they're necessarily negative. Like, I mean, I think, to me, again, it's even that, is a gift. It's like you can look at it as something that's negative, or look at something that, man, this just saved me from something, right?
I think we pay attention to it more. Don't you?
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's negative. I think it's something that it's alerting us, right, to an event. Like, and I don't had my friend listened to me to begin with, the guy wouldn't have ended up in her house, right? Like, so I mean, that's a positive, but I think when people don't follow through with it, it becomes
but you think of fear as a positive thing.
Yeah,
meaning
very
that
much
the fear is the fear of self-preservation, of course, the instinct itself that is saving you or saving other people.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. I talk about with clients. I've talked about this on my shows like umpteenth times. Is that even when you're dealing with negative entities and things like that, they're a gift. These things are a gift because they are just mimicking back to you where you need to heal. And it's like everything in the universe that is presenting itself to us is presenting itself for a reason. There's nothing in our life that is an accident. This is, that's the amazing thing about the fact that, as conscious beings, we get to create and perceive our universe. And everything that pops up is a reflection of something that's going on within ourselves. So, it might not be nice, but guess what? That's the next spot. You got to figure out what is going on, because nothing happens in a vacuum in this universe. Nothing is an accident. So, people like to think that it's stuff that's, it's out there and it's just bad. Well, no, like that. There's a reason why it's in your experience. You're resonating with it somewhere, so you got to figure that out. So anything to do with the psi and the paranormal, which again is something that I talk about in the book, is all that stuff is it'll tell you where you are. You might not like it, but it will tell you where you are emotionally, mentally, everything. And
we have a very interesting comment here by Lynn. She said that it's frustrating to try and help people when they don't listen. And that's, again, it is a law in therapy. Should be a law in parapsychology and everywhere. Or even in the life, people. How many times do we need to get the bumps on our knees, like the fall and hit ourselves face flat before we understand this? me including, So, in order not to be frustrated, I think that when people don't listen, we should just turn around and leave and not even provide our amazing insight into it. Absolutely not, because people, well, first, they don't appreciate it. And second, they have to have those lessons. Karmically, they have to have those lessons to go through. And if we prevent something from happening, for example, well, first, we can't prevent something from happening if it wasn't already ordained, right? Supposed to be happen. So then they have to learn their
You guys have my
lesson.
mind just spinning right now about all this stuff. It's so it's so fascinating. Like you said, if we're set on a predetermined track, and that nothing, nothing's by accident. It's interesting. It's got you thinking about all your decisions that you make every day. You're faced with different circumstances.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it is interesting. I mean, I don't believe anything is like preordained or anything like that, but I do think that we have I do think that we have callings that we decide upon before we get here. And it's just what I've come to understand through people. I could be completely wrong. But it's yeah, it's very interesting when, to address her question about, helping people that won't be helped. It was actually Jordan Peterson who said, if somebody's not listening to you, stop talking, because you're devaluing yourself by continuing to try and talk to the person that's not listening. You're devaluing your knowledge and your information and yourself. And if you sit back long enough, and he's dead on about this, if you sit back long enough and listen and watch them, you'll figure out where they are. And
he doesn't just say, that stop listening or something. It's turn around.
No.
He said, stop.
Pay attention.
Like, pay attention.
Stop talking.
Stop talking.
Stop talking, but pay attention.
Yeah.
Because the people will tell you where they're at. And I've found that more than not. I mean, I've taught post-secondary. I've taught all of those things. And but people don't do a lot of observing and listening. And people tend to get stuck in their story. And I write about this in The Gift of Instinct as well, is that people will write a story. And I talk about the Slender Man case in my book, The Gift of Instinct, and how these two girls got up and went out and were trying to murder their friend, and whatever, all because they had written a story about this Slender Man, right? And then the one girl roped the other girl into going and committing murder. And here you have an instance where you had two people believing in this story to the point where they had gone out, no basis for it, just whatever they were telling themselves in their head. I mean, it's a really extreme example, but there's a lesson in that, right? It's like, how many of these stories are we telling ourselves on a daily basis that we're believing, that we're then going and acting on, that just simply aren't real? Like, we believe ourselves, which is a good thing and a bad thing. We believe that if we sit down in a chair, the chair is going to hold us up. We tend to believe our experience, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's correct. So I think when, if people are stuck in their story to that degree, and they're just, you can talk yourself till you're blue in the face, but unless somebody has hit rock bottom, I can't do this anymore, I can't look at myself one more day in the mirror without doing something different, unless you're there, you're not going to see any progress. If somebody's just come and you're ordering somebody to do something and change, that change isn't going to last very long. Any psychologist will tell you that. But if you've got people that are just not listening, don't keep devaluing yourself and keep talking. It's not worth it.
I can actually picture Jordan Peterson saying that, so I can hear him in my head.
Yeah. People can watch it on YouTube. It's actually it's a great lecture.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
In fact, he many years ago, when I discovered him, oh my God, he saved me. He saved my life by just one comment. And I could not believe it. It's like, people can go to therapy for so long. And I never had a therapist, but, he was my therapist for so many years, just like through his lectures. And he is so fantastic, just helping people through his lectures and books.
Yeah, like we need needing people in the society that are able to turn around, and I think stop the sometimes the coddling of what people want to hear. And there's a lot of therapists out there that firmly believe that, it's just you gotta kind of like eke around people's feelings. And I mean, and that's one thing, as a researcher, that I just could never do. And it was one of the things I became really known for in my talks, and every time if I do expos or whatever I'm doing, is that people might not like me, but they know exactly who I am and where I stand on something. Not all, even when I was taking clients and things like that, when I was doing more investigation stuff and sort of less the education side, some people would want the magic rainbow fix of, come wave a wand in my house and fix it.
People.
Yeah, and fix it. And it's just not how this works. This starts with the living. It doesn't start with what's out there. It starts with the living. So it was one of those things where, I would just straight up tell them, like, look, here's what's going on, and it's like, if I think there's some delusion going on or something, I'll tell you what it is. You might not like it by the time I'm finished, but you'll know exactly where I stand on it. So I've always kind of prided myself on that, and I do on supernatural circumstances too. If there's something that I'm disagreeing with, or whatever, you might not agree with me, but then that's fine, because everybody's got the right to do that. But I definitely won't be the one keeping my mouth shut on the issue.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, because with my clients as well, when people come, and a lot of the times, of course, people are looking for help, and but a lot of them are seeking, like you said, the magic pill, right? The magic wand. And then when I realize that they don't want to do the work, and I tell them that, there's not going to be patting on the head and babysitting your feelings, okay, that you're going to have to do the work. And with me, you do the work. There's not going to be just sitting and chatting and me babysitting your feelings. And they were like, oh, I said, well, if you're ready, then we can start, because without it, there's no moving forward in anything.
Well, and people get stuck, like I think in the paranormal field specifically, but also in the field of psychology and therapy, like what you were saying. I mean, and they're all tied in together. I think that's one thing that people need to know as well, is that, like, parapsychology is, clinical parapsychology is exactly what we're talking about right now. And this journey is not for the faint of heart. You have to do some hard looking at yourself. And there's a lot of people that would just rather keep this at the surface level and say, you know what, I'm just happy watching, Zach Baggins on Ghost Adventures, and that's where it stops for me. But when you go further into parapsychology, you cannot not end up looking at you. And that's the thing with this field, is that you end up, going to look for, the ghost in the closet, and you open the closet door, and then what's staring back at you is yourself. And so you always end up coming back to, holy crap, this experience wouldn't even be here if I wasn't resonating with this experience. What is going on with me that is attracting this, what's going on around me? Like, I mean, you just have to look at yourself, and not everybody is ready to do that. A lot of people will turn around and say, I'm out. I can't do that. I've had clients that will turn around and have the worst stuff going on in their house, and they'll turn around and say, I'd rather have that stuff going on in my house than to look at what the problem is. Oh yeah.
It's easier.
Very
much like
so.
Dr. Elliott mentioned at the very beginning that, there's so much stuff around, so much information, and so many interesting books, and I just don't have the time to do that. That wish that I had, and I wish that I had too. But then I realized several years back, I'm like this knowledge, intellect junkie. Like, I want to absorb, I want to know. And then it dawned on me, I had this incredible insight, and I think not from the help from my higher self, whatever they call it. And it said that you already have everything. You already have all of the knowledge in the world. And I'm like, okay. And since then, I have not been looking around, like running around, absorbing all of that information, because there's so much, and people do so much research, and everything is so interesting. And yesterday, I've read a quote, and I forget who said it. They said, You can learn so much. You can read as many books and hear as many lectures, but the truth comes with yourself when you stop all of that and it is inside of you. And that was so profound because several years back, when it came to me, I realized that this is it. I don't need any more. I don't need any more certificates. I don't need any more degrees. I don't need to follow anybody's footsteps. It's me.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people, they do the name dropping and everything, like, oh, I know that the famous person and this famous person. The famous person is myself, and what is inside of me, the divinity. It's people can look at that from the perspective of being arrogant. Has nothing to do with it. This is the truth. When you are looking for the truth, you look inside. So like you said, Morgan, you have to look inside. And if you're not ready, you're not going to do it.
No, absolutely. And that's exactly how it works. That this is an inner search, and it's something where you're just unfolding more pieces of consciousness. And I've got a group of people here in Edmonton, and we do this work together, and that really, really helps, like, people out there that really want to get into this, to find a support group, people that want to do this work together. And it's been a phenomenal journey. And the more we uncover, just when we think that we've hit some sort of precipice with it, we realize we haven't, that there's some new thing. And sometimes it takes us on investigations, sometimes it takes us on road trips, sometimes all sorts of stuff. And but at the end of the day, the experiences that you can have, when you begin to tap into that greater consciousness, are phenomenal. I mean, my great grandfather, when he was doing his work, he ended up becoming friends with a medium by the name of Louis Benjamin. And Louis Benjamin had very low education. He was, nobody famous by any stretch, but he was a channeler. And he ended up with a sitting group, and he would channel some amazingly great minds. And here this guy who had practically no education was coming out with stuff that was just unbelievable. And to the point where he ended up coming out with the name or the personality of my great grandfather's mom. And Louis Benjamin, he didn't even know who AD was. So it began to change AD's perception. And the more he became open, and openness is the big part of this field, the more he became open to these experiences and to his own vulnerability, the more stuff began to show up for him. And through these sittings, through what he was being told, what he was experiencing during these sessions, and he was like, oh man, this is the real thing. And it wasn't that he was, they're sitting there table tipping and, doing all this kind of a thing. It was a full on experience, which ended up to be his two books. They were the transcripts of the sittings, and the information in these books, the 20th Plane and then Birth Through Death, is invaluable information. And at that point in time, nobody had ever heard of this stuff. Nobody had heard about, the idea that if you, find joy in your life, then you're tapped into this, this greater consciousness. That if you, none of that was out there. I mean, this all sounded like crazy to everybody that was that was listening to reading this book. But you read it now, and you've got places like the Rhine and Windbridge Institute, all these different, people that are studying consciousness and life after death, including Eben Alexander when he had his near-death experience, all back up exactly what AD had discovered and experienced, and that was way back when. So it's like, this stuff is all about openness and vulnerability, and some people aren't ready for that.
And mind you, he found it inside of himself, that truth.
Yeah.
So we should all be looking for truth in ourselves, not the outside. We can gain as much knowledge as we can, but the truth is always within ourselves. This has been such a fantastic conversation, and I hope that, and I'm sure even that many of our viewers and listeners understood the message, how important it is to listen to ourselves, to our our intuition, our instinct, and ourselves. So I thank you. We thank you, Dr. Elliott and I, and all of our viewers and listeners. Thank you for appearing on our show on Science and Paranormal on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM. This has been fantastic conversation, and we hope to see you again on our show.
And if anyone wants to check out Morgan's work, you can go to entityseeker.ca. It's got all her social media listed on there. And also check out her podcast, supernaturalist.com.
And if you like and enjoy our message, also go please to YouTube and like and subscribe Science and the Paranormal with Dr. Elliott and Dr. Yana.
Appreciate you coming on tonight, Morgan. Thank you.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
And thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
See you next Tuesday.